Vacant and abandoned properties have a direct effect on neighborhoods, and demolishing or renovating those rundown buildings might be an opportunity to create more housing or development. There's no shortage of blight. Nationwide, it's estimated there are 16 million properties, and that's increasing. In some Cleveland and Detroit neighborhoods, the amount of vacant buildings outnumber the occupied ones. What can be done? More and more states are utilizing something called a land bank to turn things around.
The term land bank is almost a misnomer. So the goal isn't really to create these massive inventories. It's in fact, let's go ahead and get this property and then get it in productive hands.
Land banks acquire property through foreclosures, purchases, and donations, and then work with neighborhoods to turn them back into something the community wants. This vacant and abandoned property isn't economically feasible for many investors, so that's why a land bank steps in.
Of course, we lost money on the deal, but that was a community investment, right? It's a public investment back into that neighborhood.
We're not here to make a profit because if you have to make money doing this kind of work, especially in the beginning, it's just never going to happen.
The benefits of reducing blight are many, including property values will likely go up and crime will likely go down. This woman lives in Dayton's Pineview neighborhood, which the Montgomery County Land Bank helped to fix up.
When you have a group that can come in and do that, that's a good thing because it makes us look better in our neighborhood. People wanting to come and live in our neighborhood, because we want that, we want the life.
Here's another thing. In Flint, Michigan, when a land bank intervened, less than 1% of its property ended up back in foreclosure, compared to 57% sold at auction. Even transforming small vacant land bank lots can make a difference. One Cincinnati man is turning them into orchards.
It's funny, after the orchards go in, I only ever hear positive things. One neighbor told me, man, you're gonna spoil me. Just having fresh fruit on his block.
Today on the pod, how land banks work, who benefits, why Ohio land banks have more lasting power than most, and how affordable housing fits into all of this. Let's get into it. This is Brick by Brick, solutions for a thriving community.
Brick by Brick is made possible thanks to leading support from Deborah and Robert Chavez and Greater Cincinnati Foundation, with additional major support from AES Ohio Foundation, Lori Johnston, Susan Howard Foundation, the George and Margaret McLean Foundation, Diane and Dave Moshe, the Dayton Foundation, the Robert and Adele Schiff Family Foundation, and more. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to Brick by Brick, where we're highlighting solutions for a thriving community in Southwest Ohio. I'm your host, Ann Thompson. Vacant and abandoned buildings can change the character of a neighborhood.
You don't want to see a vacant home because it draws negativity and it flows over to your house, whether you know it or not, And usually you know it because you get all types of negative things going on.
One study found a single vacant building on a block can reduce the value of nearby properties by 20% or more. Rundown properties don't just look bad, they're also unsafe. Cities have to spend money policing them and putting out fires. Years ago, a study of 8 Ohio cities, including Dayton and Springfield, found vacant and abandoned buildings cost $64 million to those 8 communities, and when you broke it down, it was $182 per household in Dayton.
No one likes to see boarded up homes or homes with smashed out windows or homes with a lot of overgrowth in the yard.
Montgomery and Hamilton County have thousands of nuisance properties. See where they're concentrated at cetconnect.org and thinktv.org. Leading up to the 2008 housing crisis, many communities were looking for ways to address vacant and abandoned properties. Brian Larkin is the director of the National Land Bank Network. He says people behind in taxes were just walking away from their homes.
And instead of paying the taxes or instead of them being able to auction the property off and someone quickly buy it, people were just abandoning properties in ways that hadn't been happening before.
In the early 2000s, Michigan took a major step by fast-tracking the foreclosure process to get property in the hands of a responsible entity, in this case, the land bank. A land bank is a government or nonprofit that acquires and maintains vacant, abandoned, and tax-delinquent properties with the goal of returning these properties to productive use. Ohio followed Michigan's lead in speeding up the foreclosure process, but it also took it a step further with a permanent way to fund county land banks, a portion of the delinquent tax and assessment collection.
The thing about it is, though, that is the only example in the country of annual reoccurring dollars that are set, they exist. For the rest of land bank funding, it's many different ways.
Larkin says today there are more than 300 land banks in the U.S. He's surveyed some of them and found affordable housing is emerging as a top priority. Ohio sees land banks as a valuable tool and doled out $30 million to them this year in the first round of its Welcome Home Ohio program. The grants help land banks buy, rehab, or build qualifying residential properties for income-eligible Ohioans. The Montgomery County Land Bank got more than any other county, $7 million. Former executive director and now senior advisor Mike Grauwelman wrote the grant request. He says this award will enable Montgomery County to build and sell 40 residential properties and to renovate and sell another 24.
We haven't determined exactly which neighborhoods. We haven't determined how many in what neighborhoods. But the objective is first to create affordable housing because this is for residents 80% AMI or average median income or less. So affordable housing. But we also want to see if we can't leverage that new construction to change the attitude of the market to a neighborhood as well.
The land bank has already started acquiring properties for renovation.
These would be typically houses that are in reasonable shape because we're permitted up to $60,000 in acquisition costs from the state and $30,000 for renovation. We're likely to do more than $30,000 worth of renovation to those houses, and then we will sell those as well.
Grauwelman says the land bank is in discussion with other potential partners, including the Montgomery County Port Authority, County Corp, Habitat for Humanity, and Citywide Development. As director of the land bank for a decade, he says the most meaningful project involved fixing up the Pineview neighborhood. That's on the west side of Dayton, not too far from the VA Medical Center. Brick by Brick's Emiko Moore spent time talking to Pineview residents about the evolution of the neighborhood and how the land bank stepped in to assist. Hey, Emiko.
Hello. Pineview is a strong, tight-knit community. Neighbors know and watch out for each other, and people take care of their homes. And the Neighborhood Association is active and very engaged. But in 2017, residents were seeing some abandoned and rundown homes. They partnered with the Montgomery County Land Bank to reposition some of the problem properties, which helped the whole neighborhood. Let's take a listen. Pineview, a neighborhood perched atop one of Dayton's highest points, has long been a symbol of pride for its residents of more than 400 single-family homes. Historically an African-American community, it was built block by block in the 1950s and 60s, providing a haven during times of redlining and housing discrimination. Julia Capers, first president of the Pineview Neighborhood Association, recollects.
It had a reputation of low crime, friendly neighbors, and that's where I needed to be with my two kids. The neighbors know each other, we look out for each other, and that has continued to this very day.
Karen DeMasi with Citywide, a nonprofit focused on community development who works with Pineview, is encouraged to see young people moving to this West Side neighborhood.
It has always been a pretty stable middle-class neighborhood with a lot of home ownership for a city neighborhood. They're all different styles. There's some bungalows, there's some long ranches, there's some 2 stories, but it's kind of an eclectic mix of homes throughout that community.
In the mid-1990s, construction of Highway 35 intersected Lakeside Lake, a recreational spot for the community, and over time, the neglected body of water became unrecognizable. Julia Capers lives across from the lake and recalls.
Well, it's kind of like an eyesore because there was so much undergrowth and old trees, and we had a lot of activity down there on the lake because they could hide among the brush and do whatever it was that they did.
In 2016, the residents, as key advocates, started raising funds and volunteers for the lake cleanup. They partnered with Citywide to restore the lake to its former glory.
It's like a new facility, and We appreciate it. The neighborhood appreciates it.
At this time, many Pineview neighbors expressed concern to Citywide about safety and property values with some abandoned and rundown homes in the area.
When you see, vacant houses, that means that the yard is not taken care of, and you get, trash. And some of the houses, the younger drug dealers started, you get all types of negative things that you don't want, don't have control over.
When DeMassey heard the community's concerns, she consulted the Montgomery County Land Bank. Paul Bradley is the executive director.
One of the conversations we had with residents, this population is aging. A lot of homeowners who have been there for a very long time, and they have seen their home values kind of slowly drop to a point where you might have needed a new roof, or you might have, as you're aging, need to build a ramp on your home, but you weren't able to pull out a line of credit or have any equity in your house to accomplish that.
The Land Bank, working with the City of Dayton, Citywide, and other community partners, shared in a neighborhood meeting their Thriving Neighborhood Initiative to stabilize the neighborhood.
Again, in these tipping point neighborhoods, there's plenty of properties that are strong, well-maintained. That's what you want, a good mix of that already happening, and then actionable properties that we can have some sort of positive benefit on.
The first work was demolishing 7 blighted properties on the main entrance and another 5 in the neighborhood. Lisa Parker Rucker was president of the Pineview Neighborhood Association during this time.
It was very positive. People were glad to have the quote-unquote eyesores taken down, and it actually spruced up the entryway for the neighborhood being Gettysburg, South Gettysburg.
The Land Bank pinpointed 3 homes that could be rehabbed and sold to raise values for the whole area. The initial values were $19 to $27 per square foot, but after rehab were selling from $50 to over $90 per square foot.
Again, significantly raising those comps, showing banks that there's value out here, that this is a strong, stable neighborhood.
Abandoned or vacant homes also have a direct correlation to mental health and crime rates in neighborhoods.
According to our counterparts at the City of Dayton, Pineview was the neighborhood that saw the greatest increase in home values, and also one of the greatest reductions in crime.
Today, many enjoy Lakeside Lake, home values have stabilized, and the dedicated neighborhood association continues to strengthen Pineview.
As long as we have our neighborhood association to speak the voice of the people in unity, I know that we will thrive as a neighborhood. And it's helpful when we have outsiders like, the Citywide and the Land Bank who are willing to come in and make some contributions, because we like where we are. It's why I'm still here.
I just love the neighborhood. I love the pride. I love the togetherness. This feels like home.
Thanks for that, Emiko. The story of Pineview's decline has happened to so many neighborhoods. I really liked how the residents took an interest in fixing up a nearby lake, realizing it could help them too.
Yes, I was just there recently, and the lake looks beautiful. I saw many people outside enjoying Lakeside Lake, which has some new historical signs that were just put up.
That's great. Well, where do things stand now?
Right now, the 3 homes that were renovated are still occupied by the buyers. The entrance to the neighborhood has more green spaces. And according to the Dayton real estate agents, the average home price in the last year is around $120,000, so the market has stabilized.
That's good news, seeing that home values are rising, but still relatively affordable.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll catch up with you later, Emiko, for the takeaways. You can see a video story on the PBS app with Emiko as she shows you what the Pineview neighborhood looks like now. The Montgomery County Land Bank has been busy. From 2011 to 2021, it demolished 1,200 structures, renovated 83 units, transferred 23 properties to new owners, as well as 70 commercial lots. In the Cincinnati area, the Port runs Hamilton County's land bank. It says in 10 years, it has transferred 1,000 properties to new and responsible end users, preserved $34 million in property values through demolition, and stabilized more than 50 historic structures. The National Land Bank Network says land banks are helping make equitable, inclusive neighborhoods and resilient communities possible. Here's Brian Larkin again.
land banks are the places in place to help people remain in their communities, stay in their homes, and then be proud of the things that they live around. So I think they're going to keep a strong core in a lot of the places they are now and continue to grow incrementally.
For example, with the help of land banks, the median sale price in Detroit grew an additional 12% a year. And one study showed cleaning and greening vacant lots can decrease gun-related violence nationwide by as much as 29%. But there are limitations and lawsuits. Coming up on Brick by Brick, we'll tell you about those limitations, but first, how the Hamilton County Land Bank is hoping to make a difference in Cincinnati's Sedamsville neighborhood.
For us to come here and start working in a way at such scale is really, I think, and they see that, such a value to them and to their neighborhood.
And a fruitful effort on vacant lots. That's coming up on Brick by Brick.
Brick by Brick is made possible thanks to the generous support of so many, including Murray and Agnes Seasongood Good Government Foundation, Rosemary and Mark Schlachter, the Camden Foundation, Patty and Fred Heldman, Dee Dee and Gary West, the Stephen H. Wilder Foundation, Judith and Thomas Thompson, a donation in memory of Frank and Margaret Linhart, and more. Thank you. We couldn't do this work without you.
Hey, it's Herns Laguerre Jr., one of the team members behind Brick by Brick. You know, our new show is about solutions for a thriving community. But if you think about it, we all have a different perspective of what a thriving community should look like. That's why we need to hear from you. We want to know what a thriving community looks like to you. Maybe it's more housing, more parks, or stores, or even safer sidewalks. Whatever your vision, we hope you'll share it with us. You can do that by heading to the Brick by Brick show page on cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. There you'll find an audience question button. Just fill out the survey and that's it. We look forward to sharing your hopes and dreams with the rest of our neighbors in future episodes. Thank you.
Welcome back to Brick by Brick. The port, which runs Hamilton County's land bank, is focusing much of its attention now on Sedamsville, where it acquired more than 60 properties through a court judgment 2 years ago. Sedamsville is a hilly neighborhood on Cincinnati's west side along the Ohio River. About half of those pieces of property the port acquired have buildings on them. Executive Vice President Philip Denning took Brick by Brick on a walking tour through a section of the neighborhood. Initially, some were in terrible condition. He points to one.
We got into the property, we started stabilizing the property. In the basement, we noticed, and our contractors noticed, that you could see light, like lots of light, through the foundation, the stone foundation wall. That's the kind of building that would just literally fall into the street, which happens. So we stopped work and we fixed that and stabilized it.
In another home, the whole back wall was leaning out about 1.5 feet and on the verge of collapse. You wouldn't know it now. The port has stabilized that building, put in new cinder block, replaced the roof with sheathing and rafters, and redone the floor. And that's only the beginning. Where does the financing come from? Many different sources. Denning says Hamilton County gets about $2 million a year from the delinquent tax that funds land banks. Some of that money has to be used for land stabilization.
Cleveland, Columbus, they don't have super hilly neighborhoods like this that have topography issues and hillsides and buildings falling down the hill. That's just not something they have to worry about. So we end up spending a lot more money on some of those issues. And we also have used that historic fabric to create new programs inside the land bank that are unique to land banks.
When properties are in the land bank, they're exempt from property taxes. In addition, Denning says the port can leverage money from the city and the county, and because it has a high risk tolerance, it can also accept some hard-to-use funds, like grants from the Ohio Department of Development, the Ohio Department of Health, and Community Development Block Grant funding.
And so one of the constant struggles we're in is improving the property as best we can, finding enough funding to improve it as best we can, and then selling it to a homeowner at an affordable price.
The port works with neighborhoods to review acquisitions and approve sales of property, making sure both are on the same page. We have a video extra of the Sedamsville tour. You can search it out on the PBS app or via Brick by Brick on your smart TV. If you drive around Cincinnati, you might see a community orchard on a land bank property. It's the idea of Chris Smyth, who in 2017 was working at the nonprofit Price Hill Will as sustainability coordinator. People would come to him with green space ideas.
There's only so many design exercises I could tolerate with a neighborhood, with other neighbors, where people would come up with these recommendations like, we should put an amphitheater there. It's like, really? Right next to someone's home? Like, I don't think there's only so many amphitheaters we need in a neighborhood.
He had another idea. Why not plant community orchards on vacant lots the land bank was holding?
Something that we could get a bunch of volunteers around, plant in a day, and then through like slow, tempered guidance or stewardship, I might refer to it as, we can actually grow food for our neighbors.
Smyth, now director of the Common Orchard Project, leases them from the land bank at no cost. By the end of this year, there will be 40 of these greater Cincinnati orchards. And while land bank property helped propel this project in the beginning, only a handful of the orchards are on land bank lots now. Smyth says many provide 10 to 20 households with much of their yearly fruit consumption. Think peaches, plums, berries, and more. So the land is being put to good use for the neighborhood. There are limitations to land banking. The National Land Bank Network says, with really hot real estate markets, if you start a land bank now, there won't be any abandoned property for you to get because everyone else is buying it. The Montgomery County Land Bank has changed its strategy because of that. It's pursuing distressed properties through sheriff sales and other means, and is getting more aggressive with the owners of nuisance properties. Here's Mike Grauwelman again.
So we are filing lawsuits, nuisance suits against property owners in targeted areas because there are limited resources to do that, to force the speculators to begin to do something with those properties.
Other limitations include court challenges. Some property owners think Ohio and other states have been too aggressive in the way they take over their foreclosed property. Cleveland.com reports one lawsuit accuses the Cuyahoga County government of unlawfully taking millions of dollars in home equity from local property owners who fell behind on their taxes over the past 2 decades. It claims this, quote, systemic, institutionalized, multi-decade practice and policy to profit from property owners beyond the taxes and fees those property owners owed violates the Constitution and largely affects residents who are poor, elderly, or from minority communities, unquote. Among the key takeaways from a National Land Bank survey, that more of the focus needs to be on affordable housing. And land bank staff and boards should continue working towards racial equity and providing leadership opportunities to people who look like the communities they represent. Remember, if you want to learn more about land banks and brick by brick in general, there are plenty of resources. There are web articles, Hearns and Amico's video and audio stories, and online extras. Go to cetconnect.org and thinktv.org. And while you're there, click on one of the big green buttons to give some feedback or answer our current audience question. We'd really like to hear from you. Amico Moore is back in the studio.
Hello.
Hey. And we welcome Hearns Laguerre Jr.
What's up, y'all?
Time for takeaways. One thing I noticed is that land banks have to walk a fine line when it comes to acquiring property through foreclosure. One of our sources, the Center for Community Progress, wondered, what is the most fair and equitable way to balance the interests of the property owner who's walked away from their obligations with the interests of the community?
Yes, absolutely. And land banks generally do not want to hold on to properties for a long period of time. Their goal or mission is generally to return them back into productive use. They'll go in, they'll rehab a place, renovate it, or demolish it, but they really want it to be working in the community. They go where the rest of the market doesn't want to go. And once the market wants to come back in, that's when they step back and find another area to help out.
You know, another thing I think people should focus on is the compounded effect these blighted properties have on a community. I know a lot of people talk about that they're unsafe and they could be an eyesore, but they also decrease property value in the surrounding area. Companies don't want to invest in areas where property value is decreasing, so what do? They don't invest. This disinvestment leads to fewer jobs. Fewer jobs can lead to less economic opportunity, which unfortunately leads to higher crime in a particular area.
And blight can be contagious. You really do not want it sweeping across a neighborhood or a community.
Sure. If these land banks are able to step in and revitalize these abandoned properties, I think it will have exponential benefits for these communities.
Those are all good points. Some people are still concerned about what they see as overreach. This fall, an Ohio House bill looks to expand the methods by which land banks can acquire delinquent property even further. There are some Cleveland property owners who have filed suit claiming the government unlawfully took millions of dollars in home equity from them after they couldn't pay their property taxes. They point to a U.S. Supreme Court decision last year where the court ruled that Minnesota violated the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution through the Takings Clause. And you can bet that land banks are watching this closely.
For sure.
Oh, I bet so.
There are plenty of resources online. You could find them at cetconnect.org and thinktv.org. Thanks, guys.
No problem.
Thank you.
See you.
Coming up on the next episode of Brick by Brick, Cincinnati is using predictive data analytics to keep people in their homes. Can math formulas prevent evictions?
The newest thing that we're trying to do is let's go pre-eviction notice. Let's find people before they have an eviction notice in their hand and head off their sort of new or emerging crisis as early as we can.
That's next time on Brick by Brick. That's our show. If you like what you hear, please rate and review our podcast. It helps make it easier to find. We hope you learned something, and if you did, please share it with your friends and family. For Emiko Moore and Hearns Laguerre Jr., I'm Ann Thompson. We'll be back soon with more solutions. Take care. Our show is produced, hosted, and edited by me, Ann Thompson, with reporting and story editing from Hearns Laguerre Jr. and Emiko Moore. Our executive producer is Mark Lammers. Our show consultant is Gloria Skursky. Gabe Wimberly is our audio engineer and mixer. Zach Kramer runs the lights and cameras. Derek Smith is our production specialist, and Jason Garrison is our production manager. Kelly May heads up our marketing and promotions, along with Mike Shea and Bridget Dillenberger. Alyssa Stephenson handles the website, and Steve Wright is our designer. Bill Dean and Andreas Kruja are the engineers for the show, and our chief content officer is Colin Shenamblo. Our music is from Universal Production Music. Brick by Brick, Solutions for a Thriving Community is a production of CET and Think TV, Southwest Ohio PBS member stations.